I'm here as ever with Laure Jackson, my friend from Jersey. Hello, Anne.
Hello, every blessing, every hope, every peace, every healing on you, whoever is listening. It's lovely to be here. Thank you.
Now, firstly, I know this is in the past, but congratulations, 30 years marriage, which
Oh,
is beautiful. Very recently for you.
uh,
What's the sensory implications of celebrating 30 years of marriage? How do you sort of package that in a sensory health thing?
oh, well, I tell you, this one was really different because my dear husband is suffering. So when you have pain in anybody's life in any way, shape, or form, which normally comes through the tactile system. But it can come through any of our senses because pain ultimately is too much of something in any of your senses, and the brain just interprets it then as pain. But for him, absolutely coming through the tactile system. So everything else, we had to have a really pared back wedding anniversary. I had been hoping maybe go on a cruise, go on a holiday, do something like that. But actually, under the circumstances, living with multiple sclerosis, a visual impairment, and now trigeminal neuralgia, all that stuff comes together. And it's just like, well, how can we celebrate this to really honor and be thankful of where we've got to? Because anybody who has been married for any period of time just knows just what it takes to stay committed and to be committed and to learn how to honor and to love and to respect within who we are as humans. Whether we've got sensory healthy issues or not. But that was definitely one where we had to pare everything back because all senses are much more heightened when there is pain in the system. And the smallest, you just don't want to inflict or not inflict even any more pain, but you just want to care. You really do want to care. So we had a lot of quiet and gentle and peaceful and not a lot of anything. Um, but some lovely flowers to watch and to smell between us.
But you see, peaceful is good. And we've said this many times now that we have these ideas of what we want to do, whether it's a Christmas do, an Easter do, a wedding or anniversary. And we want to have this, we want to do that. But actually, in order to honor the person sort of in the center of the celebratory bit, actually, we do need to be considerate. So, yes, sometimes let's make an effort. I remember chatting to an older couple who were in their 70s, 80s, and I said, you're such a good example of why I want to keep coming to church because I know you're struggling. I can see your walking stick and the struggles, but you turn up to church. What an amazing thing. And apparently, they told me later, they said, this is our last Sunday at church. We're sick of the pain, sick of coming. What can we possibly contribute? It just hurts. And then I said that to them, completely unknown. And they said, we're going to church. We're
Right.
going to keep going. And they battle through every Sunday. And it was hard. I mean, they've got literally old person struggles of joints that don't work. And they built up to the Sunday morning in order to get to church. And they sacrificed other things for the thing that was most important.
That's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing, and that's yeah, that's good to hear. That's really precious to hear, actually.
It is. Right. We do have a question for you from Peter. Now, anybody who listens to my show normally knows that I have a few issues with the whole daylight savings thing. I think it's stupid. I think it's dangerous, and I think it should be criminalized. Just get rid of it. But anyway, I'm going to refer to somebody else's question who asked a question that I would like to ask. What are the sensory implications of the clocks suddenly going back or suddenly going forwards? That's Peter.
Oh, well, that's a fascinating one. Never been asked that one before. The sensory implications of clocks going backwards and forwards. So, if we take it back, then just get into my head as I process these questions and where I go to think about them. So, go to the obvious first, which is sleep and body clock and natural rhythms that we have that are normally set off by sensory input. So it's like when you're sleep training a baby, one of the biggest things, one of the first things that most of the books will tell you is that it's like if you get them used to going down when it's dark, and therefore we have blackout curtains, then we are helping them to understand that nighttime is the time for sleep and daytime is the time for being awake. So right from birth, we are getting used to that natural rhythm of it dark, sleep, light, wake. And we do all that we can when we're young parents to do everything that we possibly can to get as much sleep into that night as possible and help train the child that that is the time for sleep and then there's the time for wake. So then all of a sudden, especially off, or many of us will go for the kind of like 7 o'clock in the morning, 7 at night. And we most of us will fit somewhere within that, typically. Obviously, we're talking typically. Then when all of a sudden you have an hour, your body has got used to this thing. Even the sunrise and the sunset, the transition is slow. So that it is only like 10, 15, those minutes of which the day lengthens and the day shortens. That's a gentle change, and we can do that. Our bodies just move into that, and that's not a problem. We can go to bed, find the time that we always have done, even though our visual environment is telling us something different. But clocks changing quickly, especially in a season where you get all of a sudden you've got a full hour length, more or less, of daylight. That is not helpful. It really isn't helpful. That's a long time. That's a big shift in a very short, well, in the hour. One day it's this, and then the next day it's that. That's not helpful. And for not even just for our sensory healthy people, just typical people, it takes children especially, it can take days to get used to what the new 7 o'clock in the evening is, what the new 8 o'clock in the evening is, what the new 9 o'clock is. Yeah, it's hard. It is tough, but it's mainly from a sensory perspective. I would say that it's mainly because of vision, mainly because of our visual input, not so much about anything else apart from possibly the interoceptors giving us that internal awareness of our body clocks and those kind of things as to when we might get hungry, when we might typically have our toileting patterns and things like that. So there's a little bit of interoception that might get affected, but the visual sense is not helpful in that context.
We see it, I think, most visibly in a dog. You've got a pet dog. They get fed at 6 o'clock every night. All of a sudden, they're getting at 5 p.m. They're probably okay with that. But if you then say, no, it's now 7 p.m., sorry, dog, they don't get that. There's no ability to read the time. They can't reason. They just know that now they're hungrier and where's my food? So we see it very clearly with a dog. And the difference with humans, of course, now to some extent we can reason, we can justify, we can look at the clock and think it's a different time now. And sometimes I actually do run 2 watches on my arm. I have done that in the past where I think, I don't know what time it's supposed to be. And I'm really confused by, was it 4 or 5 or 6? Where are we? I don't know. I had an email just recently from a guy we chat every week from California, and they are 8 hours different. Well, their clocks went back before ours did.
It
So
did.
our normal time changed. And then I got an email saying, what time is it right now, Andy? Because I don't know what time I'm supposed to meet you anymore. No, it's in good humor. We have similar feelings about this,
Mhm.
but it's one of those things. We can see it in a dog. We can see how they don't get it. We can get confused and think, well, I'm hungry. When it goes the other way and we get an extra hour in bed, oh, great, I can just lie in a little bit. But when it goes forwards, now we're losing sleep. It isn't just the clock change, and everything gets heightened and exhausted. I know
Mm.
for me, I'm 3 or 4 months before I actually settle down. I'm okay with it. It really does screw my brain.
There you go. And that's quite something to take that period of time. So we know there is that transition time. And that's a perfect example of thinking that actually, for me, most of my people, it's more of days, but for others, that transition can be a long time. It really can. Do you know, I never knew that about the dogs as well. I never thought about the pets because we don't have a pet. Well, we did have a pet tortoise, but it doesn't quite count. But yeah, I can totally get that and understand that. So again, that transition, you would be much, much better. Maybe that's what, pet owners do. They just slowly move over a period of week or two or three, the time of which, the animals get fed because they do not understand and they will not understand, and you can't communicate in that way, obviously. If I was a pet expert, I'm sure they've got their own techniques, but it's exactly the same thing of what we would need to do to treat children or anybody who has those difficulties with transitions, which a lot of our sensory processing issues feed into.
We have, as a family, said several times, can we find a way of not changing the clocks? Can we
Mm,
find, I do a 3 to 6? Can we just not suddenly do, right, I'll do 4 to 7? Because I don't really care what time it is, as long as you need to say the right time, which is
yeah.
confusing in its own way. But actually, then we won't be getting up earlier or later, because this is one of those things where it does take me out. And one of my sons has a similar thing. This
Right.
isn't like, okay, we're good to go. This is many weeks of, yeah, but it isn't. And it wasn't. And
Yeah.
okay, what it is, but it's like jet lag. It really feels. I've had jet lag once, and it feels almost like that. But I have it for a few months, not severe, but I don't adjust well to it.
Yeah, I was going to say I wouldn't recommend. I think Britain is a great place for you. And as your friend, we're just like, yeah, I'll if you need anything anywhere else in the world, I'll go. I'm not great at jet lag either, but I do not want to put you through that. But yeah, my son, he's a drummer. He had a connection with a drummer, not in the UK time zone, and they missed their slot yesterday. So it's just like, oh no, he was really looking forward to it. One of the high level drummers, and managed to connect, and so they're rescheduling, but still, it's time zones are something else. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have various folk in the States, and it does because they have more than one time zone. And of course, you go to Russia, it's even worse. I mean, I don't even know how they can cope what time it is. I just
Mm.
it's madness. But we try and get through these things. But of course, if you've got a dog, then it's very very easy to see. No, don't care. They don't have a clock. They can't reason. They don't know what time it is. They just know they're hungry, and it's been 24 hours, 25 hours. Where's my food?
Mm.
Whereas we can think, well, yeah, okay, well, we'll change it slowly. But of course, if you don't have that ability to really understand, and we talk about this a lot, don't you? You always mention knowing the space that you're in, or being able to live within your sort of sphere, or your little world. When that gets completely thrown, everything gets thrown. So I'm thinking particularly for younger people, maybe sort of under eight, where perhaps telling the time isn't their strength yet, or
Mhm.
perhaps understanding time lengths. I know as we get older, we get much better at being able to guess a minute without a clock. So when you're
Mm.
younger, that's more difficult. But how do parents help? I don't want to use the example of a dog not knowing, but it is very clear cut because they don't have that ability to understand time. But if you've got a smaller child, actually,
Mm.
there's no difference. They're not dogs, but they don't have the ability to understand time. They don't understand time length. So how can a parent help prepare somebody? Okay, you're about to lose an hour's sleep. Go. How do you do that to a child who doesn't get it at all?
Yeah, yeah. Stick to what they know, and I think it is those small transitions. And being able to explain to them. So you would going through all the senses and using each of the senses to help. It would be like, so say if they are losing an hour where they have to go like to bed, um, basically an hour earlier, it is like slowly taking those 5 minute increments over the period of a week or two, either beforehand or after the clocks have changed, probably a week before and a week after, so that the transition becomes a lot easier and it's not so noticeable, and you're halfway through the transition when the clocks actually change. So you would use shorten everything that you do. So that normal like bedtime routine, um, and the mealtime routine is shifted that little bit, 5-10 minutes each day to something, and then shortening the times in between that you would do such and such. So your meal times, just see if you can just shrink them a little bit so that you can shrink everything over time, so that it's a quicker, you're moving through your typical schedule a little bit quicker as well. So it's a combination of doing the shift and then actually trying to shorten down each of the things that you do, so that you can help the body clock to stay in familiarity with the sensory experiences of what's eaten, and teeth, and what they hear and their sounds, but and what they see, but just using all the senses to bringing down the light quicker, using blackout curtains if it is light outside, whereas it wasn't light before, using sounds, using familiar songs, to help the transition to help the sequence of what you normally do stay the same, but you're shifting the time in which it happens, so that the time in and of itself becomes irrelevant. You have just thought to change it when it is happening. As you, the adult, when you do these things are changing, but you try and keep the actual routine as structured and as familiar to the child as possible.
Going away from daylight savings time and all the rest of it, I'm thinking about like people who work shifts. I think I mentioned this last time. I was chatting to Richard, and he said if he had his way and he was prime minister and all the rest of it, he would actually ban overnight working because the amount of strain physically on the body. And like he said, we are not designed as human beings to operate in the dark and at night. Our eyes can't see. Our bodies just want to be asleep. Having been a trucker, getting up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, it physically hurts to do that because your body is in the most dark part of the night, and you go back in time, of course, and people what rose with the light went to bed with the darkness. which created a beautiful rhythm. But of course, we do live in a society where nighttime working is now normal. I've done 12-hour shifts overnight driving trucks. It's quite hard, and I've seen physical changes to guys who've done that, particularly men who've been driving trucks when I started, who've been driving for 30, 40 years at night time, and their eyes are actually sunken. You can see physical differences from what they've done. But if somebody is having to work like a night pattern or a shift pattern, is there something you can help adults who are going through that transition? Because rather than like twice a year losing an hour, gain there, if you're working a shift pattern and it's changing through days, late nights, whatever, how can you best help people who are in work to move through that cycle? Because some shift patterns will help you and some won't. So
Mm.
how can you then best still be at your best in terms of sensory health?
Yeah, I would try and it's very tricky. I mean, it's hard because we're fighting nature. So, but where we can bring in those daylight bulbs, um, uh, it'll be interesting to speak to somebody who has actually been in there. This isn't. I mean, I'm just talking as a therapist with what's coming to me, but with no actual experience of doing this. So do take this with a pinch of salt. But it'd be really fascinating if anybody's listening who does have this experience, because I'd be really keen to hear what they say. According to me thinking, it'd be great to have the likes of daylight bulbs trying to help the brain to recognize what's going on. And when you want to be awake, that you have all of the things that are there. So you'd have the sounds of bird sounds, you'd put those on. You would have daylight bulbs so that you can help your brain think, right, this is the time that I need to be awake. Um, and you might have the smells of somebody, mowing the grass if you can, light something, or just put something into the sensory experience of lights and sounds and smells, trying to keep a breakfast routine. So you eat the things that you would normally have for breakfast. Whatever time you get off shift, that is your however you structure your wake times.
Mm.
Try and keep it as normal as you can so that your body and your brain is associating the sensory experiences that you give it with that sense of normality. And then conversely, even if you're during the day but you need to sleep, it is block out the sounds, block out the sights, make sure you're still, make it as dark as possible, trying to mimic, to try and help the brain register and recognize where it is and how it is, and finding that rhythm when their internal clock is telling them that it's different, but you're just using every single sense that you can to help them, make it a new day, when in reality, a new day is not happened. It's in the middle of the night, but it's a new day for them.
It is very bizarre having a curry and a beer at 8 o'clock in the morning. Um, but if you've been up since 5 o'clock the previous day afternoon, it makes perfect sense. I remember I saw there was a police officer at the time, and he was obviously finishing his shift, and he was coming into the supermarket where I was, and he bought a ready meal curry and a little beer, and I thought, well, that's a bit weird for breakfast. And then it sort of dawned on me, and I thought, no, he's coming off a night shift. And he was coming off a week of night shifts, and he's like, yeah, end of my night shift. And that was his dinner, and then he was going to revert back to a different shift. I know that, I mean, I haven't done shift patterns. I have worked nights exclusively. I've got some knowledge of shift patterns. I mean, there was one that was generated by Walker's Crisps in Leicestershire in the UK, that because they do have to work morning, night, whatever, they generated one. They put some time into it. So it was mornings, then lates, and then nights, and then days off. So it was an 8-day pattern, I think it was. So yeah, 2 mornings, 2 lates, 2 nights, 4 days off. That was it.
Okay.
So your body's always moving you're going through the night. Whereas I know that for some people, they do 7 nights, 7 early, 7 lates. And all they describe it as is it hurts physically to do it. And then everything's frustrating and tiring, and you're not at your best.
I really like that. That again, that's that slow transition, recognizing this is the world that we live in. We've got electricity, we've got stuff that happens like throughout the night now. But that's really honoring. I really like that. It's like you get the word out. Like if you have to create shifts, do it in a way that really helps humanity work and function as best we can.
I like the fact that you said we're fighting nature, though. Well, I like the fact that we are, but I like that you've referenced that, because we are going against what we are designed and created to be able to function to do. It's amazing that we can. I mean, I've worked nights. There's a different let's just say there's a different climate and culture and community at night time, 2 till 6 in the morning. Everyone's a little bit different.
Yeah,
There's a lot more grace, I think, is how I would put it. There's a lot less grumpiness, is actually how I would verbalize it,
yeah,
because everybody's tired and everyone's just can't be bothered to be angry. So it's just you get through it.
yeah. It's funny how, yeah, that everything is possible, but not everything is helpful. It's like, well,
Yeah,
we are remarkable. We're remarkably adaptable creatures, beings. But actually, really, yeah, not everything is helpful.
everything's possible, not everything is beneficial,
Mm,
which comes from the writing of Paul in the scripture. A bit of a paraphrase of it, which I think is true. Yes, nighttime working is possible, but not necessarily a good thing. I mean, it's
hmm
nice we can do Amazon next day, great, but for you to get it next day, it has to get to you somehow, and that means somebody somewhere has got to transport that parcel. That's just a parcel, let alone
mm.
everything else. Have you got any success stories that any people have come towards the end of a therapy session recently?
Oh, well, I've just got a new one in. And what's lovely, what feels successful is that it's all the light bulb moments that are going off. And it's just like, I never realized, oh, that makes so much sense. And especially with one of our particularly tactile, overreactive ones. So all of the clothes that are bothering, the picky eating, the not wanting to come for to be touched by others, getting really narc, talking about being irritable or angry with others. She's like, don't come near me. And yet when she chooses to, it's like the biggest and the deepest and the hardest hugs ever. And you think they were going to crush you to bits. And it's just like, yeah, that's, tactile overactivity. That is a classic. That's a classic what we see. And she's like, really? And then it's just like, and then, oh yeah. And then it's the fact that we can do something about it. And she's saying, you're saying that that's not just I just thought that's how she was. I'm saying, well, that is how she is because of her overactivity in her tactile system. And this is what we can do to help that, to minimize that, to calm it down a little bit so that her life can function a little bit more, or at least we'll have a go at it because we never know what's going on in the brain. But we do know after 30 years experience that this stuff can change. So not only was it a lovely thing of it really makes sense. And you're telling me, she's saying, you're telling me that these things are connected. And I'm saying, yes, they are connected. And then it's this, and then it was also, you can actually do something about it. That was another light bulb of thinking, oh, crumbs. Though this might look different, to us, and it might be easier for us as a family if we put these things in place. So yeah, we'll circle back maybe to that one or ones like her in time to come, but that's just a fresh one this week, and that's really nice for me. That's so I love bringing hope. That is such a strong part of why I just love what I do because people just to air that this stuff is real. That was the other thing, and that this, yeah, it is real, and that there are things that can do about it. And she said that the fact that you just validated that it is actually as hard as it is for us. And I said, yeah, it's not mild. We were talking about the whole concept of things being mild, and I have to be very careful because I don't know where people are at. I don't want to offend people, but I do want to, because if somebody says, "Oh, it's quite severe, it's quite profound," the experiences that somebody's having, that can be hard for some people to hear. But we're just chatting about it, and this mum wasn't, offended at all. It was just, I'm so glad to hear that actually you see that it is actually as hard as it is when they're doing the best and they're loving and they're. But she said, I just feel it's just really validating, what we're dealing with. So that was nice.
The caring profession. You see, helping people know that they're not on their own, which is such a part of life because one thing that happens as soon as it goes wrong, we break a leg, we have an illness or whatever, we think, oh, it's just me. I just got to find a way on my own. And sometimes I've spoken to Dr. Richard Scott and it's like, I just wish people would speak to me because that bit, that's really easy to solve.
Right.
But of course, unless you know that,
Yeah.
then it's really hard. And that's why we have doctors and we have people like you who they can, folk can come to and say, well, this is where I'm struggling. And you say, yes, I know you are. Let's try this. And those easy fixes, and there are some, they do exist. They are real.
Mhm.
Actually, it's great. But, and I said this a lot, you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know it, how can you know it? So we come to people like you who can help us.
Very welcome. Would love to chat. Anybody and everybody. I love having the opportunity just to let folks know that this stuff is real and there are things that we can do about it and that you're not alone.
Fab. If you don't want to be alone and you want to contact Anne and get some help, you can go to her via our website, pure247radio.org, pure247radio.org/ALJ, and that will connect you to Anne Laure Jackson. Thank you, Anne.
Brilliant. Thank you.
God bless. Pure Media, the magazine, is hand perfected with some of the finest writers from around the world that we could find, and yes, Andy B too. New editions are released just for you on the first Friday of every month, from our family to your family. Pure Media, the magazine, is available now. Sign up for free at puremediafamily.com/magazine.